Welcome back to yet another episode. Today's the day. We're going to get into the PENTAX K-3 Mark III color versus the OG, original gangsta PENTAX K-3 converted to monochrome. Now, originally I had an idea, and what I was going to do was actually use my exact settings that I have set up on my K-3 monochrome for my monochrome custom image mode, but then I thought about it, and it wouldn't make sense to do that, given the fact that the K-3 Mark III has a completely different image processor. The fine sharpness has been changed. They re-engineered a whole bunch of things. It's a completely brand new camera, so it really wouldn't be fair because we don't know the difference of, adding something +1 from the K-3 Mark III versus the K-3 original. So I reset everything, so everything is at 0. The parameters are identical across the board for both cameras, with nothing additional applied whatsoever for the custom image processing. And technically speaking, this is absolutely not an apples to apples comparison, but it is something many of you said that you wanted to see, so I figured I'd humor you. Okay, we'll do it. The apples to apples comparison was the original K3 in color versus the monochrome converted original K3. So again, take this all with a grain of salt. This is just sort of a, just to pique your interest kind of video. And also coming up as well, something totally different for myself. My neighbor actually gave me their Canon EOS Rebel T4i camera to do a review on. So I'm going to be comparing that with PENTAX. Now, the T4i came out in 2012, so yeah, it's a base entry-level Canon, and we'll see how it actually fares in regards to comparing it to PENTAX. How far behind is PENTAX? Is PENTAX even far behind? What are the differences, pluses, minuses, all that fun stuff. So yeah, I'm going to be getting into that in a later video. I have a number of lenses I can use with this, but I am recording the video that you're seeing right now on the T4i. It's actually doing a pretty good job. I'm impressed. It's not bad. It's not bad. But yeah, all right, let's get into the monochrome versus monochrome converted images versus JPEG custom images from the K3 Mark III versus OG converted monochrome PENTAX K3. Let's go. Okay, so let's take a look at the images. On the left side is the PENTAX K3 Mark III with custom image mode set to black and white with matching parameters of the monochrome converted original PENTAX K3. Those images from the K3 monochrome converted camera are on the right side. And the first thing you'll notice is that the brightness of the images from the monochrome converted PENTAX is brighter. However, the K3 Mark III with the custom image mode, again, the parameters are exactly the same. With that said, it appears as though the shadows and blacks are much more defined on the PENTAX K3 Mark III. So this is ISO 200. And just to look at the sharpness, we'll take a look at this fabric box here. Has a lot of line for line detail. So it has a lot of line for line detail, but you can obviously see that this is a brighter image, right? However, the gradient shift from the grays to blacks is more defined on the K3 Mark III. Now let's move over to ISO 400, and they look pretty much the same. Again, not much difference, again, except for the brightness. Let's just go over to this curtain here. So you can definitely see the sensitivity to highlights on the K3 monochrome converted camera. It is just an overall brighter image. It is a lot more sensitive to light. And again, the settings were absolutely identical. Exposure compensation was the same. The images were shot specifically to have a dead even exposure. Again, there is a slight difference with the angle, and that I guess that's just the bottom plate on the K3 monochrome converted camera versus the PENTAX K3 Mark III. Different shape. I'm not sure exactly what the issue was. The tripod was exactly the same, did not move, but anyway, I digress. Okay, so let's go to ISO 800. Now, interestingly, let's just see here. What were the actual 1/40th of a second, 1/30th of a second? So it seems that the metering is different. The K3 Mark III meters differently, and I've mentioned this before. It does meter differently than previous PENTAX cameras. Why? I don't know. It just does. But again, the K3 monochrome converted camera is a brighter image. Quality is still pretty close in regards to sharpness and detail. Actually, here it's slightly starting to actually go in the favor of the K3 Mark III, which is very interesting. And these are not JPEGs, these are DNGs right out of the memory card. No processing, just exactly what the sensor, whatever the sensor picked up, that's what I'm showing here. Yeah, so that is interesting. There is more detail on the K3 Mark III image. It could just be the fact that it is a slightly darker image. So let's go to ISO 1600, and it's more of the same. Not much difference here. Not much difference compared to the ISO 800 image. It's pretty much the same. You can see there is a bit of loss of detail, though, on the K3 monochrome converted camera. There's a slight bit of very, very, very slight bit of noise that you're starting to see here at 1600. Let's move on to 3200 ISO. Now let's take a look at 32. I mean, they're pretty close, but right now I'm actually slightly preferring the K3 Mark III version of black and white. However, like I said, this is not going to be an apples to apples comparison because the processor is completely different. There are enough differences between the cameras that this is not, by any stretch of the matter, a apples to apples comparison. Now, line for line detail, they're very similar. They are very similar in regards to the rendering and just the line for line detail. Let's go down to here. They're very close, very, very close. But you can see more noise on the K3 monochrome, which I find interesting. However, like I said, totally different processor. It's not a very fair side-by-side comparison. I already did that one with both original K3s. So let's go to 64. And I think here is where we're going to start seeing some differences. Some pretty major shift of differences here. Let's go to 100. And yeah, you're starting to lose detail with the K3 monochrome. Again, it's the sensor. It's an older sensor. It's never been known to provide very good, higher ISO image quality. However, it is still better than the K3 color sensor converted over to black and white because that sensor just is not very good at high ISO, period. It never has been, and anyone who has one can easily attest to that. So the last few, 12,800 ISO, and once again, we're losing more detail, right? So again, we're losing detail here. And you can see there is more finite detail on the K3 Mark III image. Let's go to this box. Yeah, so as you can see, there is more line for line detail all along the K3 Mark III image compared to the K3 Mark I monochrome converted camera. And let's go here to the cans at the top. You can see some noise, but it's a much finer grain. So this is what PENTAX was talking about. They did retool the entirety of the sensor and the processing to reduce noise, but maintain actual detail. And I think they did a very good job in regards to doing that. You know, they weren't kidding about that. So this is 25,600. I always get confused with that. Yeah, 25,600. Okay. So 25,600. Now let's take a look at the image quality. And right away you can see just how blotchy the original PENTAX K3 converted to monochrome image actually is. The text on this box here is pretty blotchy compared to how smooth and detailed the same box is on the K3 Mark III image. However, you can see more lines, but they seem to be exaggerated. Like they're way thicker than they should be because it's just a wood grain on here, right? So, yeah, it's pretty interesting how the differences are actually coming out. Let's move this all the way over here. Yeah, there's more detail, you know, line for line on the K3 Mark III image. However, I'm sure the K3 Mark III monochrome camera would be vastly superior to the K3 Mark III color then converted over to black and white. It would be a totally different story. But as you can see, there's a massive loss of detail on the K3 Mark I monochrome converted camera. And let's go to the final image here. So this is 51,200 ISO. And as you can see, there is a lot more detail on the K3 Mark III image. However, you know, it also does have grain, more of fine grain, versus the K3 monochrome converted camera. And that, let's get to, there we are. Here's where you see most of the difference here. This is very legible compared to the K3 monochrome image on this box here for the ear loop face masks. The line for line detail that the K3 Mark III sensor can maintain across the ISO range is pretty remarkable. You know, this disc here with my former dog's paw, you can't even make out what that is. But here you can just barely make out, there's, you know, where the nails would be, that kind of thing. You know, and then this fabric box here, let's take a look at that. Yeah, you can kind of see the texture very, very slightly on the K3 Mark III image. But yeah, the K3 monochrome is just completely and utterly blotchy. It's just blotched out entirely. However, it is a brighter image. But side by side, you can clearly see the difference in the actual image quality. And let's just do one more. Let's just take a look at this here fabric squirrel at the top here. Now this is interesting. There's actually more detail up here on the K3 the K3 monochrome converted camera. And I think it's just the way it's handling the shadows just for this specific area. So there's more contrast, which is showing up as extra detail. However, the overall image, it is a lot grainier. So yeah, this was a pretty interesting result that I wasn't entirely expecting to sway the way that it did. Yeah, so those are some pretty interesting findings. You know what I'm saying? I honestly wasn't expecting the differences to be what they actually were. I did think the K3 monochrome converted camera would show to be vastly superior, but again, it is not apples to apples in a comparison. The K3 sensor alone is very old. The K3 Mark III is a brand new generation of camera, completely reworked from bottom to top. New sensor, new image processing parameters, fine adjustments, all that stuff. It's all brand new, enhanced. It's like, version 4.0, right? So I guess in a matter of speaking, it kind of was expected. However, I'm sure the K3 Mark III monochrome would be vastly superior to the K3 Mark III color, just using the custom image parameters to shoot in black and white. So, but these are what the findings were. This is what it looked like. This is how it was. So, yeah, I don't know what to tell you. It is what it is. Anyway, if you like the video, leave a like. If you haven't already, please do subscribe. Always helps out. If you want to support the channel, that info's down at the bottom underneath the description. And just in case you don't, you should always read the description. I do explain some things in there. And that's pretty much it. If you want to support the channel, that info's down there too. And that's it. I'm going to go. You'll see me on my next video. I'm out.